And Fox.
Yes, all right, it's 3 o'clock. I'll call the Winnebago County Human Services Board to order. Fourth order of business, public comment. Anybody have any public comments on the agenda item? I don't think we have anybody on Zoom, do we? All right. All right. Then we'll go on to the program. CW Human Trafficking Committee. Annette, we're gonna do that one.
Yeah.
You wanna just come up here?
Yeah, you can. Oh, you come right up here.
You're the whole program.
We don't fight, I promise.
All right, so I'm here just to talk a little bit about the 3 different components that we have for addressing, in our way, addressing minor sex trafficking. And so we only, as an agency, do it for people who are under the age of 18. We do not provide any assistance for people over the age of 18. Damascus Road is in our county. They do a lot of work specifically with human trafficking victims that are adults. And then also Reach. Reach has an advocate human trafficking advocate that will also reach out and assist. So our spectrum is just anybody who's under the age of 18. And we have 3 components. So we have like our internal response, and then we have a community response, and then also a regional response. So what our internal response is that any reports that come in related to sex trafficking of minors, we do assess that. Similar to how we assess child abuse and neglect, we assess any of those situations that come in that somebody is saying they suspect somebody's either at risk or is being trafficked. So we do that. And then we also have an internal meeting. And what we're doing with that internal meeting is we bring everybody from each area that deals with children. So we have somebody that comes to that meeting from behavioral health that provides therapy services to children in our service facilitators, somebody from long-term support, the children's long-term support area, and then in child welfare, we have somebody from each one of our 10 teams, at least one person that comes to these meetings. We use the meeting to make sure that we're all kind of staying on top of what's happening in our community and what's going on and how are we going to address it, making sure that we have experts within our agency. So we have trainings that happen. We bring in community people to talk with that team. And again, what we're trying to do is just have at least one expert on every team so that if somebody has a question or they have somebody that comes in that they believe is at risk of being trafficked or is being trafficked, that they can go to that person and say, hey, can you help me out? How do I best work with this youth? So that's what we meet every other month. It's a really big group, but it's a great group because we'll bring in law enforcement officers to say, talk about what are the trends, what's going on, those kinds of things again, so that we all stay on top of it. Also, we'll share information about clients that we may be working with, not their names or anything, but just some circumstances around what's happening so that we can learn from each other. We also will share information if we're hearing about adults that are suspected of trafficking youth. We'll talk about who those adults are and share that information so that, you know, if somebody else is engaging with one of these adults, then we know that something's going on and we can step in a little quicker. So that's the purpose of that whole group. That group also developed a response protocol for what we do in our agency, how we respond to minor sex trafficking. A lot of internal trainings we've done, like lunch and learns, things like that. We've also do groups when it's appropriate. So a couple of our staff have been trained on different curriculums. It's called Ending the Game or My Life, My Choice, Love 146. Those are just different curriculums that are out in the world. And so they've been trained on that. And at times they'll do groups. We just have to have the right amount of people and the right number of people and for people that truly want to do those groups. What we use a lot of that training for is just to educate ourselves when we're one-on-one with kiddos. So we don't always do those groups. Because we've learned that most of these, there's boys and girls, most of these victims don't really want to talk about it with other people, meaning like their peers. So we try to do a lot of one-on-one. So we also, as an agency, we are part of a community response too. And what that community response, it started being called a coordinated community response, and that was people from a variety of areas. Schools were involved, law enforcement was involved, courts, the DA's office involved, us, different providers within the community were involved. And we were doing that for a little bit of time. We had a paid facilitator, we had a grant. So somebody was paid to help us to address the community's response to minor sex trafficking. Once that facilitator no longer could come because he was no longer being paid for, it kind of all fell. So then we tried to revamp it again a few years ago, probably 5 years ago now. We, Human Services, said that we got a training, sent a multidisciplinary team to that training that included some law enforcement, some schools, some hospital staff, some of our staff. Went to that training to get a committee going, and it was called the I Committee, which is Ending Youth Exploitation. Again, with the same plan in mind. We were going for a while. COVID hit, like everything else. We've struggled getting it back up and getting people to come. And one of the reasons why we're struggling getting people to come is because a lot of the providers also go to the Outagamie County group. And so it's a lot of time for them to have to go to a lot of groups. So we've asked Outagamie County if we'd be able to join their group and kind of have a regional response. We're still waiting on that. So we are trying to meet and getting people there as often as we can. There's different advocates too in that one that I forgot about last time. UMOS is another program that has an advocate that addresses minor sex trafficking. So they also come to that. Then we also have a regional response. So we have our internal group. We have this community-based group that's not doing real great, but we're still trying. And then we have a regional response. And we have been part of, what year did we do that? 2018. We were involved in writing a grant. It was a state grant for, I believe, $250,000 to gather as a region, like all of our region, it's from Alpaca over to Sheboygan up north, but a ways up north, I think we even have Florence in there, down to Fond du Lac, and that whole region that we would work together to respond to minor sex trafficking. With that money, Outagamie County funded a position to kind of be the coordinator. And then some of our bigger counties, we kind of had a couple counties that we were each taking care of the support. And what we've done is use that money to do a ton of training. Some real boots on the ground type training, school personnel, therapists, our social workers. We have brought in national trainers. It's been really awesome. Just some exceptional trainers to help educate all of us on what it is about, what's minor sex trafficking about, who does this happen to more often, what can we do to prevent it, what do we do when somebody's at risk. So that's what we've really been focusing on. We've been able to get the grant renewed every 2 years, except now we're done. This is our last year. So that position will be gone, but we'll be able to use some of that training that we've had. We've sent a couple people through that funding to the national trainings to bring that all back. So I think we have a lot of knowledge that we gained from that. We did quite a bit of tracking of who we were seeing and our response to that, trying to increase resources within the region. That's always been a struggle. And again, when you have COVID shut in the middle of that, and now a really tough job market, it's hard to keep everything going. But I think this county is in a really good position to be able to respond. Well, I'm not sure if that's the best word, but I do think that we have people who care about this and who are educated and are able to respond to help to the best of their ability when youth come up that are at risk of being trafficked. So I think that's kind of where we're at in a nutshell. Let's see if there's anything else I'm going to be sure to tell you guys. We also do that hub developed a services and resource guide, and it's this teeny little thing. And if you're like me, you need glasses and maybe a magnifying glass, but the youth, it's great for them because it's little and it can fit in the back of their phone, so that they can pull that out. Like if you have a phone case, it fits right in between the phone and the phone case. So they have that if they ever need it. And that's why it was made so little. But when you open it up, it's like this big long thing with all kinds of different resources for them. One of the big things that we work on with these youth is harm reduction. We can't prevent them from, well, we can, but you're not going to get us very far to prevent them from being out in the community and potentially running into people who may traffic them. So what we try to do is to talk to them about, you have a safe place to come back. And we call that harm reduction. Here's some, here's our card, here's some information about us, here's a bag with some personal hygiene things. And when you need us, we are here for you when you're ready. Because one of the things that happens with these youth is that they become basically brainwashed into thinking this is it, this is all they have, and that we aren't safe. So that's all that we keep talking to them about is we're safe people here, we're here to take your calls, we're here to help you out, and those kinds of things. And when I was talking about who was at that team, that internal team, some of our crisis center staff are part of that. And one of the great things about that is they get those calls. So they're our first people, it's not during the day that's coming into our staff here. They'll get those phone calls and then they help kind of get those people to the right places. All right.
Do you have numbers, maybe like a typical year, like how many calls and how many?
I don't have a typical call, but I would say that we have somewhere between 12 and 25 youth that we are aware of in any given year that are at risk of traffic or being trafficked.
If you find some who are being trafficked, do you have any way of saving them?
The way that I guess what I would say, I don't know that we save them, but what we do is we try to connect them. So we have had some youth who push back, and we have had some youth, we just have one right now who is pretty involved in a sex trafficking situation. Who is,
And what did you say?
and well, it's wanting to stay is different than feeling that that's your only way out. I would say that they may say that this is their place, but it's because that's where they feel they're safest. Sometimes some of these traffickers will say they're going to harm your family if you leave, or they provide so much for them where they believe they love them. So a lot of that's like, they tell them that they're there for them, they love them, they're going to provide for them, they give them all these really nice things, take care of them, give them a roof over their head, and they believe that's the only person who will do that. So then when we step in and we try to help them see that there is a different way. Like with this young woman right now, she has left the area to go to school, but which is great that she left the area. So she left the area to go to school on her own with her mom's help. So it's their choice, they're doing it to get away from the people who are trafficking her. And so it's wonderful that she's in that position, that she wants to get away and that she's still going to school and doing what she can to make a good life for herself.
Good.
One is the numbers. I know you talked about this grant is going away, and then, but it's not stopping. It's growing from what I've been hearing, right? So it's not gonna go away. So what kind of numbers are there? A lot of numbers in our area that you're dealing with, or it's kind of hard
I
to
think
say?
for us, we probably get about 25 in the year, but I think there's a lot more. One of the things that we've noticed is when we're talking about it, when people are out in the community talking about it, that's when we find out more about it. It's happening. I mean, it's happening all over, unfortunately. And I think our county, and that's one of the things we're on. 41 is kind of a thoroughfare for some of this. It's happening. It's happening not just with minors, but certainly, Pepper Games, it happens at EAA, it happens at, as you guys know, those bigger events. I know there's going to be a big concern about the Republican National Convention, that when the Democrat National Convention was supposed to happen a few years ago, that didn't happen because of COVID. They were really concerned. So those bigger agencies that are involved will step up and do some training and be available during those times to support people making different choices.
But the numbers not going away. Now that decision, you said it's gonna go away, but one, I think about that person's got a lot of knowledge, can we use her somewhere else?
She's in Ottawa County, and yes, she's going to be one of their youth justice social workers. So we will still be able to reach out to her. But what I would say to you right now is we have staff here, and it's more than 20 who have been as trained as she is. And so they have a lot of knowledge that they're sharing with the rest of our team on a regular basis. I think the piece that we're going to lose out on, but again, I think we're very fortunate in Winnebago County. You guys have supported us in being able to send people to trainings. So I think that's what we're just going to have to now moving forward fund it for ourselves, to train people and keep people trained and up. up on everything as it changes, there's 5 stones here in the community too, they don't do as much direct service, but they do a lot of awareness and training. So work with them to be able to get that over there.
Then another question I got was, the community we talked about, that kind of fell apart. How do we get involved? How do we get people more involved? How can we get involved? What does it take? What do we gotta do?
I mean, I can tell you guys on the days that they are, that they're meeting, and if you want to get involved, or I can tell you if you can, talk to the people who are kind of overseeing that the most. If you guys can tell people that, like, hey, please make the time to go to this, law enforcement, school personnel, and people like that. If you yourselves want to be involved, I think probably more than anything is something like 5 Stones, Damascus Road, somebody who's out there doing that awareness. We're doing very much the response piece. At the end of the day, what matters most is getting the awareness out there. We did a campaign again. This was something that the hub, that grant paid for. We did a campaign of just putting posters up, and each community or each county took a bunch of posters and put them up in the bathrooms, at gas stations, and we got a lot of interest, I guess I would say, from that. People were reaching out to learn more about it, because that's what the posters were all about, and also like medical clinics and things like that. But also some people who said, hey, I saw this poster. We use that national hotline quite a bit. I should have brought that. The name.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we
Yeah.
get the meetings that you want coming up?
Yep.
Why don't you just like put a couple of those things together and we'll send it out
Sure.
tomorrow.
Yeah, that's,
Sure.
that's what I've been finding out every day. I find out things that I didn't know about, that I don't know how to, it's like asking other people that they're gonna go.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't wanna see it go backwards again, because from what I'm hearing, this is not something that's gonna go away. The last question I have, is signs. What kind of signs do you, not signs like a campaign sign, but signs that you notice that we as citizens or people could say, I think I noticed something, but I wasn't sure. Because a lot of people say, if I think of something, I'm not gonna say no. Well,
Yeah.
this is serious stuff, so what signs do we look for, what can we?
we have an indicator guide that I will send along for you guys to know that, but just basic is, kids who aren't going to school, kids who are away from home, and certainly away from home late at night. They aren't really talking about where they're at. And certainly that piece of, youth who have things that they didn't have before. They're getting new cell phones, they're getting their nails done, somebody's taking them to get their hair done, somebody's buying them a bunch of really nice clothes, which they don't have the ability to get on their own or haven't gotten on their own. Those are some of the indicators that there might be. And again, not everybody who gets these things are they being tracked, but it's that they might be being tracked. And I think the big thing at the end of the day is to remember that they aren't, it looks as if they're saying, I'm okay with this. It's, they don't know a different way, and sometimes they don't know how to get out of it. They call it the life, and they don't know how to get out of it safely. And they don't, a lot of these kids are looking for some meaning for themselves, and this gives them in their mind some meaning. And that's that the people that are traffickers are experts at getting you to believe that, getting you to believe that you need this, you want this, and this is what's best for you. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions too, then, excellent presentation. I guess I was really unaware of this whole problem. When I hear trafficking, I'm thinking of a transition out of the area, but this is really exploitation, then, is that correct?
Yeah.
More exploitation, so there are local pimps that are using these children in some ways, and then these children are staying. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
And sometimes they are, sometimes it's happening here. We have a ton of hotels in this area. And so it's happening here. Sometimes it's happening in people's homes.
Sure, but it's still all a local problem, not.
Yep, so the problem, there are some girls that are here and they'll drive down to Milwaukee.
Same thing.
That kind of
Right.
thing. Yep.
Okay, yeah, no, I wasn't aware of that. And you mentioned providers, maybe I was sleeping, but, what's a provider?
Like a agency that supports these kiddos. So like Reach Counseling, they are a provider. So Reach Counseling, they have a human trafficking advocate, they call that. And it's somebody who, if you are, and they mainly deal with adults, but they will deal with some, older teens. That they will step in to say, hey, can I help you? What can we do? Kind of the same thing that we're doing,
got you.
but that's their.
And Damascus Road was founded by a woman who was trapped, right?
Yes.
And so some first time.
And she's an Oshkosh, so that's, the Oshkosh community, reaches here.
So they're trying to help each other.
Right here.
Are these children from the three different income groups, low, middle, and high?
And unfortunately, it depends on what the, I don't know, what you wanna call them, Johns, the guys that they're hooking them up with, traffickers hook them up with what they want. And sometimes they want people who come from the higher areas. And some people don't.
Peggy.
Do you have adequate resources to deal with minors whose first language may not be English?
I do believe we do, yep. We have a good partnership with UMOS if it's Hispanic. We also have our, all of our resources for, interpreters that we are able to use.
Good.
A few years ago, I was traveling between here and Indiana probably, and I was one of those oases in the Chicago Forward, and I kept seeing, where the truck, there's places for cars parked, then there's a place over there for trucks. And I kept seeing 2, 3 kids at a time coming from that direction, and I thought, this does not look right. So I called 911. I said, I don't know what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing 2, 3, 4 kids at a time. They're coming from the truck area. And they're on the toll road. I don't know, they shouldn't be there. And I was glad I called, but as it turned out, that oasis butts up against a school, and there was a hole in the fence. And the kids were leaving school, coming through the fence, buying cookies and snacks at the oasis and heading back to school, but they just kept coming. And I kept thinking, there's only trucks over there, where are these kids coming from? Freaking out.
Well, and that would be a good thing to call on. I agree with you, Karen, that's a good thing to call on. Yeah, there is an organization, and I'm gonna use the wrong name, but it's like Truckers Against Human Trafficking. Just to, there are some truckers who are looking for that, because certainly that is a way that, people find people and move them around. But there is an organization that's out there, which is pretty good.
That big pamphlet that you
Yeah.
talked about, is that available in other languages as well?
I do believe it is. It's available in Hmong and Spanish. Thank you for asking me.
How old are these kids?
Anywhere from 10 to 17.
I did meet a girl in the YMCA pool a number of years ago who was about 20, I think, and she said, oh, I've been to Oshkosh. She was from Eastern Europe. So I've been to Oshkosh several times. She said, they used to bring me, and they would sell me as a virgin until I aged out at about 14. She didn't look like a virgin, I guess they weren't 14, but for the time she was about 9 or 10, and she was being brought into Oshkosh during EAA on a regular basis until she got saved. I think actually somebody bought her, church bought her, so that they could pay off whoever owned her, and they could set her free.
I just keep thinking about the family, 10-year-old. I got grandchildren, I don't know about, I'll let them out of my sight, how they,
Yeah.
I can picture a 10, 11, 12-year-old wandering around with some older guys or people that.
There is, and I will make a note, there's a link to a video that was actually done in Wisconsin. Or Wisconsinites, I guess I would say, just talking about how this happens and what's happening here. Actually, I think it says it's happening here, so I think it's titled, so I'll send that out, along with this, so that you guys can see that too. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Opens your eyes to the ugly world.
Yeah, it's been now with the border situation. There's tons of them coming out now about this. They're picking them and taking them out of there. Not only got to pay their family safe on the other end, and they got to pay to stay here, and then they got to. We don't have anything like that up here yet. We don't have many of those. And those big coming all over.
Right,
If
any
you have other
other questions?
questions, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, approval of minutes from the January 4th, 2023 Human Services meeting. So moved. Two second,
Second.
and motion made and seconded. Good minutes, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, then acceptance of the minutes of the January 9th, 2023 ADRC committee meeting.
I move to accept the minutes of the ADRC committee.
I'll
Second,
second it.
you've been a second, motion and second. To accept the minutes, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I got it. It's like it's Bill show.
Yes, it's the Bill show today. For some of you who got here a little early, Renee and Janet are both on vacation. They are not vacationing at the same place. They're doing different things. Renee sent me a very nice picture of herself in the ocean with her husband, and they look like they were having a great time. In St. Thomas, I believe is where she was vacationing. And Janet got a last minute inexpensive cruise, so she and her husband are cruising to, I don't know, someplace. I think she Texas to someplace, Mexico or so that's where she is.
All right.
They'll both be back later this week. So you have me today for all of the various parts of this thing. So we'll start with the inpatient placement statistics, are very familiar 3-page graphs. Always we start with Child Welfare Division, Juvenile Corrections, which is our Lincoln Hill Copper Lake, and we still have our one person there, which we expect will be there probably the better part of this year, I would guess.
Yes.
So no change there. In the bottom graph is the residential care centers. For December, the number was roughly around 2. And Annette just talked to me today that we should expect that this year that number in RCC is going to go up. It's going to go up fairly dramatically, could go as high as 4, 5, or 6.
Why is that gonna happen?
Because we have exhausted all of the possibilities and ways in which we can serve the person in the community. What's weird about it is that for such a long time, we've had like very low numbers, and now we're having a lot of them that are kind of getting to the end stage all at the same time. So typically it would be more like they go from 2 to 3 to 4, bounce around a little bit. But it looks like we're pushing up against several more kids that are just, for one reason or another, we're not going to be able to serve them in the community. And I'm just kind of like notifying you, the number is going to go up later this year. And that really is something that, even though you haven't seen it here, that kind of does happen from time to time. Sometimes you get a lot more kids that need residential level care. And that we try to prevent that as much as we possibly can. And I know that Annette and her staff are still trying to prevent that from happening, but she's kind of given me early notice that, we may not be successful and we may have a number of other kids going to RCCs. And RCC placements are around a year at length, give or take. And so when they come in, they're gonna boost those numbers up. We do not have enough money in that account. We haven't budgeted that much money in that account. So we will either come back, probably, we're thinking maybe around June, we're gonna go to the county board with some adjustments to our accounts. We'll probably have enough money in other places in the department budget, but we're still gonna have to go to the county board to do transfers.
Are these, what age group are these kids?
12 to 17.
12 to 17.
It's just treatment needs are higher than can be addressed.
Yeah.
Truly.
And, and when we say this to you, it's like we have basically probably at least hundreds of kids, that we're actually keeping in the community, and we've done that. Like, I expected over the course of the pandemic that our numbers were gonna go up then. Didn't happen. During the pandemic, they stayed down and we were able to keep them down. And so I said, my first reaction to Annette today when we met was, well, it was bound to happen sometime. I just didn't know when it was gonna happen. It wasn't like, is it gonna happen? It's like, it's gonna happen, but when it's, and the problematic part is that sometimes you get, you get a number of kids from a number of different situations that all have that level of need all at the same time. So you can have a bunch of kids that have no needs, you have some that have higher needs. It's just that we're looking at probably RCC expense going up later on
So
this year.
what's an example of a residential care facility for these folks? Like what kind of
Rawhide
are
is
they getting there?
Rawhide is the perfect example
Okay.
of RCC. It's a communal living situation. It is not a locked unit, so it's not a hospital. But it's, I don't know if you've ever toured Rawhide, but it's out in New London. They have, I don't know, probably have a dozen buildings. They kind of have groupings of kids that stay with, I think they still do the house parent thing, don't they?
Yeah.
Where it's like a mom and dad that are kind of working with those kids in their pod, let's call it a pod. And so they don't have to be in a big, like, 100-unit residential facility. It's more spaced out than that. But it's basically, you gotta be there, you gotta live there, you go to school there, you get therapy there, and you learn a trade as part of the Rawhide system. And it's expensive, not quite as expensive as an inpatient hospital, but it's expensive to have them.
I was just gonna say, it's probably, I mean, it's bad our numbers are going up, but I'd rather have them go up in the residential care than especially hospitals.
Yeah.
And those costs are, yeah.
Well, and it's also better for them that they not be in the locked unit. If they
Right,
need to be in the locked
right.
unit. They can, have they have visits from their families. They can do some outings when they get a little bit later in their progress, they can go back and forth from home. There's some family activities and family therapy that's offered. Now, Rawhide is only one of 14, 15 RCCs in the state. So we have kids southwest part of the state, northwest part of the state, or we can. Southwest, northwest, they could be down in the southeast. They're just all over the place. They just don't happen to be very many at all close to us. So, if we place them, they're gonna be probably anywhere from 2 to 4 hours away. So it makes commuting, it makes family visits more challenging.
At budget time, when you did the budget for this, how many kids were you budgeting for? Did you
One
spend-
kid for half a year.
That's what you budgeted for? 'Cause
Well-
we've been having two.
Yeah. Well, that gets it, you can get my budget, we'll talk. We'll- Later.
Cuts.
Yeah,
It's just
well,
probably-
we have to make some cuts. Yeah, we did have to make some
You're
cuts.
kind of conservative, yeah.
And our juvenile corrections is still at Mendota.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty consistent, and we had, I don't know, Ned told me a little earlier about another kid that might possibly go to Lincoln, is that one still on? That was not up. Okay, so we, what is that? Missed the bullet?
Yeah.
What's the?
Dodged
the bullet.
We dodged the
Dodged the
bullet.
bullet.
We dodged the bullet.
But it's interesting that from 2015
There
to
you go.
16, when you did have it up to 4 and 5 before,
Mhm.
you've done a great job all along keeping it there.
Yeah.
And then now something came, is there any indication what, it's not pandemic things that happened or what all of a sudden?
Most of it's youth mental health needs and trauma and just how they manage that. So is some of that from the pandemic? I don't know. I'm not, I would say yes, but that's my own anecdotal thought.
Residential care for kids, one of the significant mental health and drug abuse in teenagers is not something that there are a lot of places in Wisconsin that actually have any kind of residential or even inpatient programs for that. So if you have a kid that's pretty significantly addicted to drugs at this point, there's not a lot of options for them to go, especially if they want to continue in that lifestyle and where are you going to put them? And that is a big problem for our state, because we have a lot of residential centers that can do quality social work, they can do a lot of family activities, they can get the kids, oriented around behaving well and maybe learning a trade. But when it comes to significant mental illness and substance abuse, not a lot of these RCCs are competent to do that. The state is proposing a new kind of facility called psychiatric residential treatment facilities. They are in other states, but we don't have any here. And so the state's thinking about maybe we'll allow for a couple of these places to be built, and then we would probably think about sending a couple of these kids rather than to RCTs to probably some of those psychiatric residential treatment facilities, but we don't have them. So,
So these are mental health. Addiction
And behaviors, yeah.
and
It's-
behavioral health.
And most of this
issues.
is like it's the response to trauma that they've
Mhm.
experienced in their life, and that kids respond to trauma either, with using alcohol or drugs, aggressive behaviors in some side, some just that.
the other piece of it is intellectual disability. So if they have intellectual disabilities plus mental health, plus, let's say their violent tendencies, plus, drug use, all of those things are not in the typical RCC realm. So, but the best we have is to send them to an RCC and see if they can sort of wrap those external services into it. Sometimes those RCCs can, sometimes they can't. And the challenge really is to find an RCC in the state of Wisconsin that will accept these kids. Because we've had upwards of 50, 55 kids in the state of Wisconsin that have had to go outside the state to get that treatment. As we had one, we had Missy, who we couldn't find any RCC that would serve her here, so we had to go as far as Massachusetts to find her one place in the country that would accept her. And she did well.
And this is separate from anything juvenile justice issues.
It could be totally separate from juvenile justice, or there could be a juvenile justice component.
Okay,
So
Sure.
they're on some type of order, either a youth justice order or a child chips order, a secret child protection order, if we're involved in this.
What was the second thing you said?
A child protection order,
Oh, I thought you said something.
She said CHIP, so it means child,
Okay, oh, I got it.
child in need of protection and service.
yes.
So that's how they get chips out of it.
Gotcha.
And if you're a juvenile, it's called chips. Juvenile in need of-
Delinquent, actually, we call it delinquent.
Oh, isn't it, they get rid of chips?
No, they have a chips, but we
Oh,
don't,
okay.
we don't.
So anyway, we always have acronyms for everything that we do. But the status of things is that it's not good all around the country. I mean, these are kids that other states have the same struggles that we do with. They don't know where they can put them. They don't fit in their current array. They have to look in other states. They've got kids that don't fit anywhere. They're living in, human services offices because they don't have any place to go. So they literally put a cot. I couldn't even imagine that. They
Oh my
literally put a cot in an office of the human services department and have a staff basically stay with them overnight. And it's like, wow, and it's really, and that's happening all around the country. I listen to my colleagues around the country and they're like, they have hundreds of kids. And I'm like, how do you even do your work? Because you've got a pair, not only is it risky to put a child in a cot in a human services building overnight with one staff, but you're also taking that staff's time that would normally go to doing their regular activity, and now they're basically just doing monitoring of that kid to make sure that that kid is staying put in that building, and you gotta sleep sometime.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't even know how this is working as a strategy, because, and these folks are like, we gotta stop doing this. I was like, yeah, I don't even want it to come to Wisconsin, because I can't even imagine. If I had to report to you that we couldn't find a placement, and that my staff had to stay overnight, here in the building on a cot, or have that person be on a cot and me stay awake, or one of my staff stay awake all night to monitor that person. And it's crazy, and they need to have a bathroom, they need to be able to take a shower, they need to be able to have, some place to put their clothes, they need to have food, and it's just crazy. So at least we don't have that.
Yeah,
But we are having a challenge of finding the right place.
well, like I said, I would rather have residential than specialty care, because when I was at Winnebago, I worked on an 18-bed, or less than, and we averaged anywhere between 20 to 25 kids, except in cots in the hallway. Because there was no beds, but that's, what are you gonna do?
And they still are over at Winnebago.
Yeah, yeah,
They're over.
of course, since you gotta take.
Yeah, somebody had said to me, well, you heard about children being placed at Winnebago, being placed in adult units because they haven't got staff to care for them, to have a specialized child area. Is that true?
No, No.
They might have, they
No,
might be.
they're not. The only adolescents that are placed on an adult unit is, once in a while, you'll be, forensic units where they committed a crime,
Yeah,
like the two girls,
Underman.
the Slenderman, they were placed on a adult forensic unit, but when they place adult, adolescents on those units, then they're actually one-to-one, they have one-to-one staff with them for their protection. But they can't,
We don't have anybody in that.
we don't have anybody that's.
and I thought about that little boy out in Virginia, the 6-year-old who shot his teacher. And she had apparently reported the kid 4 times that day. When you get a kid like that, you know, what do you do with it? If a child is at only 6 years old, can't be controlled, you know, by school staff, I mean, how bad is this kid? Pretty bad. And what do you do with him?
Well, that's the
I
challenge.
see.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's where we're going. That one's probably going up this year. And if it does, you'll see it as
Yep.
we get into the year's statistic. And we're always a little bit behind, you know, so it'll take a few months to catch up. So we might play some in another month or two, but it might not show up for 3 or 4 months.
3-4 months.
But we're thinking, Jen and I are thinking maybe by June or July, we're gonna need to go back to county board and do some adjustments and transfers. Because we are short in some of our.
And just a reminder to people who are new, Missy is not the little girl's name who went to Massachusetts.
We just use that as a.
We couldn't say what her, nobody, I mean, Bill might know, none of us knew what her name was, and since she was going to Massachusetts, I said, can we just call her Missy and just let us know how Missy is doing on a regular basis, and so I have no idea what her name is. But
And that was our.
That's
first
been
out of-
said before.
Yeah.
it was what?
That's been said before.
Okay.
That was our first out of state placement that we've ever had since I've been here. I don't even know if we've ever had an out of state placement. Okay, so next page 2 is behavioral health division, top is the adults, bottom is the children. On page 2, and of course, we went up a little bit in December on the adult side, not too much on the kid side. That number is gonna fluctuate. I will just tell you that it's gonna bounce around depending on who needs inpatient level of care that we can't divert to our own diversion facility or, so it's gonna bounce around. And I don't see anything really unusual there. It could go up 2 bars one way or the other, and we'll just have to see how the year shakes out with that. And the kids basically, again, we're a few more kids there. Again, not anything.
Yeah.
I do think the same thing is true about inpatient stays though. I mean, we could see an uptick and, we budgeted, you can see our red line is the budget line, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that our average was above the budget line. So again, when we're asked to come up with things for the budget, we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Sometimes we guess right and sometimes we don't guess so wrong. All right, so last page is child welfare, security detention is our, mostly our contract with Fond du Lac, although it does include some kids when Fond du Lac doesn't agree to take them or they're full, then we gotta go other places. It went down again in December, but, it is up again, or how is it now?
About the same.
About the same. Okay, so, we were having a little trouble with Fond du Lac recently about some of their, agreements on taking some of our kids, and I think Annette's been working through that, with the sheriff or with, someone kind of above the person at the security detention. So we do have contracted beds there, and they were giving us a hard time about some of our kids, and we have to do this from time to time. We have to talk to other people about, like, hey, we got a contract with you, what's up? Why don't you pick our kids? And sometimes it has to do with their short staff and their ability to be attended. So we're constantly up against, even with our providers, you know, we have lots of referrals to make to our providers. Sometimes our providers can't handle them.
And we still got 3 beds. Four beds.
Okay, and the last one is our foster care numbers, and again, for December, it was down a little bit. But that is not alarming because, you know, we just have the kids where they need to be placed. And, yes, we are down overall, but that's because we're serving a lot of kids in their homes with a lot of services wrapped around them, and those kids are safe. So why put them in a foster home if they're still in their home or with another kin? We don't track the kinship care. We talked about possibly adding kinship care. Oh, I remember that. Somebody asked about, can we track kinship care? And I know that I talked to Renee about that. So can we get numbers for kinship care per month and just start tracking kinship care numbers? Is that easy or hard to do that?
Find out.
Okay, yeah, find out if we can do overall kinship. Because then you can see, here's the number in kinship care, here's the number in foster care. Then you'll have a better picture of, like, maybe kinship care is up and foster care down a little bit.
Do we pay people for kinship care?
Kinship care, yes, they get a payment, but it is much less than regular foster
You
care.
hear, I never know where they're from.
$200.
You hear these stories about people who've taken on, relatives' children and,
A few hundred a month.
and they're just, they're barely making it because they don't
What?
make it, but.
Let me say this. So if you're a kin and you take on a child, we are also talking to you about becoming a foster home.
Yes.
So if you go through the hoops with us of becoming a foster home, your payment can increase.
So that even though
Substantial.
the foster child in your home is your
Is your
kid,
kid. Yep, you can be a foster care provider for your kid. And then you can get more money,
yeah,
but there's more hoops to jump and you have to, pass all of the
right,
foster care regulations, but you can.
okay.
And the
those
state
ones-
actually encourages that.
And those ones are in this 43 number. So some of these foster parents are licensed foster parents, are relatives.
Yeah, so when we look at the foster care numbers, if they've already become foster parents for their kin, they would show up in our foster care numbers. But there is a kinship care that's just, you are helping your kin and you get a different kind of payment. We don't give you that number, but we can.
One of the things that keeps coming up in another committee I'm on, the extension committee, is grandparents raising grandchildren.
Mhm.
And some of them are in really bad, some of the grandparents are in really bad shape. And how difficult it is. Does that get wrapped into this?
I see many times where kin or grandparents apply for kinship care. So they can apply for the kinship care.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get turned down and I'm often in a position, because I'm the evaluator.
Yeah,
And if it's an old charge of whatever, and I don't think it pertains at all to, the child, and, money going to the child, and I think the person can handle that, I often overturn their ancient charge. Because sometimes grandparents have things that happen in their past, and then they have to deny them upfront,
yeah.
and I get a chance to look at it, review it, and I can overturn it.
There's a couple of sort of scarier stories that happened like Thanksgiving a year ago, so a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
A grandparent who, I think she may have been getting some money. And a father, it's a biological father, mother's in prison or wherever, biological father who had nothing to do with the kid at all. Suddenly, there could be money involved, was fighting for custody of his own child. He thought he could get money and how, frantic these parents were for fear this is not a person that this child should be with. I don't know how it all worked out. It may be a story you're familiar with, but I just wonder if they.
Well, it's just, I'm smiling because in Wisconsin, I was in law school for a short time, and I dropped out. But one of the things I learned in law school about Wisconsin law is that the law, the parents of minor children are in the driver's seat. They, regardless of whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, parents are in the driver's seat about their kids. And until a parent is proven to be whatever it is that they, unfit, thank you, unfit, they could be lost and gone forever, but if they come back, their rights are preeminent over anybody else. So the way the law works is parents' rights are preeminent unless they're becoming unfit and taken out of the picture.
If you talk to Supervisor Bender, he'll say the worst Thanksgiving I ever had was when I spent time doing Thanksgiving with the grandparents. He says, those were the saddest stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, and really, I mean, the grandparents do nothing but trying to
Yeah,
help their grandchildren. But at the same time, we have the charge of basically like, if a parent shows up and they want to be involved and we have something to say about it, I mean, we're doing the investigation, we're, checking them out, we're doing, our due diligence. And if the only reason that we don't want the parent to have the child is because they haven't been with them, that's not enough. That's not enough.
That's not enough.
That's not.
The kids had grandma and grandpa for all those years.
Yeah.
And
And the law of the land,
it's not reunification with the parent is the, it takes
Yes,
up, takes.
yes. law of the land is, parents have premier rights.
It doesn't have to be immediately, though. It's not like we're gonna just say the day they come or the kids are going back, as Bill said, there's some
Right.
assessment.
I mean, there's some legal procedures, like,
Procedure.
but, and I've heard the story many times, and there's a lot of great grandparents like, well, we're not so sure because, this parent hasn't been involved. Well, that's why we check them out, we find out what's going on, if they're adequate in their parenting. I think we're gonna end up.
How much of their adequate their parenting if they haven't been doing
Well,
parenting for?
We check to make sure that they're not inadequate. Put it that way.
They get opportunities to demonstrate that they can parent that child. And we don't just return the child home and say, see you later. All the services that you guys help us fund, like the safety service, your parent support program, all of those along with the social worker, go in and make sure that they're doing, so we do a little bit at a time, because we have to start with introducing them. So that they recognize each other again and get to know each other.
Right.
And then you increase your time. We do it carefully, but I understand that the grandparents can be disappointed in that.
And it'd be better if they could all get along and work together collaboratively on that process, but oftentimes that doesn't happen. So anyway, this is a little bit about the law. Yes, Harold.
I wanna go back to secure detention. Are they in a jail setting or are they just locked in a building?
They are in a jail setting.
They're in a jail setting.
Yeah, you go there, you're in a jail. So it's not in the adult section, it's in a separate section. And because I've actually toured it in Fond du Lac, it's like basically you stay in a cell. During the day, you can come out and there's like a school room where you can be, I mean, there's certain times of the day that they can be out together in a
Are you
group.
gonna sell alone?
At night, yes.
There's not another person there who could possibly, there's not a roommate situation.
No,
but one-
that's what I saw, they're all individual cells.
5 individual cells were in one pod, like at a time, so 5 individual cells, and then they can come out and do what they call a day room. And mingle there if they're allowed to do that, and then.
So it is,
Two more. Have we ever had any drug issues there? Similar to what we had at the homeless sign? Where somehow they got drugs in.
I don't think so.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a case where Fond du Lac rejected somebody? Why was the person rejected?
Well, you
I
want
would say that the youth is violent or aggressive, and maybe upon intake might harm one staff. And then they say, thank you. Or if the youth is suicidal potential.
so if they say no, then we go to a series of about 3, 4, 5 other counties that have secure detention, and we try to get them in there. So like, for instance, Stevens Point is a place that we check. Brown has
Yeah.
Brown has one?
Use Washington County, Portage County.
Washington. So, I mean, we do look for another secure detention, because maybe they won't have the same answer that Fond du Lac did. And it doesn't happen that often, that they say no. We just think that there was something going on, that maybe the staff was new, or, I don't know, whatever, something.
And we send our staff now, if somebody's a little agitated, we send our staff down there. Yes.
Overall, Fond du Lac is pretty good to us. It's close, and it's, as cheap or maybe cheaper than some of the other places that we send kids to. So, I mean, they're close, they're inexpensive, and they oftentimes put just about anybody. So they still are the best overall. We just have a little trouble.
And are parents allowed to visit children in secure detention?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. There's hours, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And
Am I correct? The police officer takes our client there? On a case, it's obviously rare, but if the kid was acting up in the police car on the way to Fond du Lac, turn around, bring him back here, or
If they were acting up on the way to Fond du Lac, I think they continued to take them to Fond du Lac and they put them in handcuffs or something if they needed to.
And then our staff would go down to help the drive through.
Okay, any questions?
Then finance.
Okay, finance. I am not gonna do as well as Janet, on this, but I can tell you that we're still in the summation of last year, so we won't have good data for you on 2023 until probably April or May, because during the first couple of years of 23, we're still collecting the last end of 22, so we can't really make any predictions about what's gonna happen in 23 right now. But by the time we get to April and May, we'll be able to say what happened in the first quarter, and now we can do some predictions about what's going on in 2020. I'm telling you, in terms of like the placement that I know about that may go up, that's probably gonna be our biggest cost driver upwards. The rest of it is about the same. We still have about the same number of people kind of coming and going through the organization. We've got, at any one time, we probably had 10 to 15 openings in like around the department. That seem right? 10, yeah, 10, 15. So it's kind of averaging about the same number of, people coming, people going. We just had a orientation this morning. I think there were 6 people in the room. I wouldn't say that's typical for a particular week, but I would say, we can probably in a month, we're probably bringing in 10 to 15 new staff. So, but it's pretty typical. That's averaging pretty typical for us. So what I can tell you about this particular list is the bottom line is 4.3 million. Janet said we're still expecting a couple of late bills yet to come in for 2022.
Late bills or late payments?
Late bills
That we owe.
that we owe. Yeah. So she said, my guess would be 4 million is where we're gonna end up with service. But she thinks it might be a little less than that. The 310 might go away. So that's her best guess on what's gonna happen again in 22.
Did we purchase a new vehicle in 2022?
No,
You got there, no?
no, we got turned down.
Or you got turned down for 23?
Did we
Oh, yeah.
finish 22? No, I don't think we did. Yeah.
I didn't think we did because you look at where it says
So I think we got
capital.
2 years in a row, we got no. Yeah.
That's what I was
And
wondering.
I think John made
That's the
the,
first time it's ever happened, 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row, yeah.
well, John made an agreement with me that if he would allow any department to get a new vehicle this year, that he would let us get a new vehicle. And I think no one got a new vehicle unless somebody sneaked one in at the last minute.
Last
So-
minute vehicle purchases are hard to accomplish these days.
So, yeah, we got 2 years in a row, no vehicle. I highly think that we will need to replace at least one of them for 24. And vans used to be right around 22,000. Now they're in the 40,000 range.
Is that why they got denied? Because they went crazy for the price?
Well, there were 4 or 5 departments that wanted a new vehicle, and that added about 250,000. So he said, I just want to hold off here. Is what I think.
I think that's what it sounds like. Right now, it's not a good time.
Yeah, it's
to buy.
just dumb
Everything's
type
crazy.
of-
Yeah, I don't think it was personal to any particular department. I just think they were getting priced.
Yeah.
Just like it started out there.
Yeah.
I remember a few years back when they sent out our rebates, that's fun. Now they get no rebates, now they're up to $5,000 and $1,000.
Yeah.
So now it's coming down where it's gonna be better. So it'll be cheaper by the future than when we were.
But I kind of think we always have, like, at least one of our vehicles is 10 years old and pushing 200,000 miles, and the maintenance becomes a big issue. And, we're just praying to God that we don't have another big.
Are you saying, Ralph, that there are vehicles that are now coming down in price?
It's coming down. Stock
The new one.
inventory is coming. Get better.
Used.
We were just talking.
The new is way up.
Yeah, the new.
New is way up.
The highway department, we have worked trucks in the past. Truck line came in, and they had $10,100 some dollar surcharge that they never had. Because everything's more, now, so they're just taking advantage now of that charging extra. That'll go away, it's just right now it's a advantage, so therefore they're.
So we'll probably ask for one for 24.
I have two more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
My understanding, a while back, we were involved in a lawsuit where the drug companies were being sued. Whatever happened to our portion of that money?
Okay, so, the first lawsuit was settled and the money came in. It's sitting in, right now, it's sitting in a separate account. And the reason it has to sit in a separate account is because it only can be used for something called mitigation, which means it has to be used for alcohol or drug mitigation for the future. So any monies that come in after this, which there's probably gonna be another 3 companies that are gonna settle this year. Our first year, I think we got about 800,000 last year, but then the number that we get for the remaining years is probably, I think, around 400,000, by half of that first year. So it's around 400,000.
But we were paying out far more than that in terms of, you know,
All those years?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Anyway, so it stays in a separate account. We used, for last year, they wanted us to pay for the Connect program, which is all of those alternatives to court stuff, that's going on with the DA's office, where they come into the DA's office and they can go into treatment as opposed to getting, processed for a crime and in court. And so we have a staff of, I don't know, 10 people who are doing a variety of programs. And so, 400,000 went to that. The other 400,000, 500,000 is sitting still in that account of the first money. Now, this year, we're gonna get, of that money, we're probably gonna get another 400,000, and we're gonna keep getting around 400,000 out for, I think, 15 years. And like, what John told me is that he was going to have that 400,000 get attached to our Connect program going forward. So that's what he said he wanted to do with that first group. Now, the second group, which is gonna happen this year, which I hear is probably gonna end up being about something similar to the other group, maybe about another 800,000. That's uncommitted. It's just in this account where it has to be used for mitigation. So the only thing that we can do is present proposals on how to reduce drug and alcohol, or use it for something related to drug and alcohol reduction. So it doesn't go anywhere until somebody approves it being used for that purpose.
Now, what about our COVID money?
Um,
Am I correct, the COVID money is not included in these numbers?
No, COVID money's in there.
It's in here, or is it separated?
We've never separated the COVID money. The COVID money isn't like a thing that just says COVID. It's like, it comes in categories of spending from the feds through the state to us that we already just spend on things like child welfare, like behavioral health. So the COVID money doesn't come in as, it's COVID money. And you only use it for COVID. It's basically, here's COVID money from the state. Here's, well, we aren't using any ARPA money. I'm assuming you mean by ARPA, right?
Well, they keep changing terms, I don't know which is which, but.
Spirit fund.
No, that's gone now.
So COVID money is basically ARPA money, and the state has 30%, the state, sorry, I'm getting the two confused. The state has its own ARPA money, and the counties have its ARPA money. I am right, the state got a portion themselves, and we got a portion directly from the feds. And basically, we don't have to put it in a separate account. We just basically match it. Well, the ARPA money for the county is in its own separate account. Okay, that's a commission. You guys are going to be, all those of you who are in the county board are going to be voting on what projects you want to have done with that.
Well, they met today.
That ARPA. Okay, so we didn't get any of that ARPA. We get the state's share of ARPA that comes through adding to the monies that they typically give us for child welfare, for behavioral health, maybe some for long-term support. They just add extra the economic support. They add extra cash into those things. So basically, they go in here and we report them, but we don't use them for anything. They just make up on the revenue side. They make up more money on the revenue side, and the so we don't put them towards any expenses other than where we can fill in for levy. So for instance, if we're, we can, for our salaries, basically, we can use ARPA money, or not, use the state's ARPA money for our salaries or for paying our vendors. And then we don't have to use the county tax levy that was in those accounts. So when you see 4 million here at the bottom, that 4 million, it basically represents levy that we didn't need because we used the other monies that came in to basically fill those spots. And then levy was freed up, and that's the 4 million that you have in levy, which then goes to the general fund, and it's all there now available to use for whatever anybody wants to use it for. Because we don't have it, we're not allowed to fund. So basically, it's all here. You know, everything that.
Well, I don't know, might have to follow up on that, because it's my understanding the general fund of the Winnebago County is separated.
Right.
And so if that's separated there, I don't understand why it isn't separated here. But I'll follow up, I won't take the time for that.
I would say, so like, in economic support, we get a contract with a line item and it says you can spend it on these things, and it goes right into where Janet, that would be expenses too. It just, it's expensed like everything else we do, but we know, like for 2023, we're gonna be doing the unwinding, so we can use it for overtime, we can use it for temporary staff. We can use it for retention bonuses.
Okay, well, that's okay,
It's kind of like reimbursement.
The states are for money that comes to us is basically filtered into lines that we spend. The counties are for money had to go into that separate account because it's the counties are for money and you guys are gonna use that for whatever you want to use it for. So we are benefiting somewhat from ARPA because they're passing on with more cash to our normal channels. I thought you were gonna ask me a question, you know, is it gonna go away? It's gonna be done at the end of 24. That will be the last year that we'll get any extra state ARPA funds. So this year we're getting some funds, probably have some extra funding. Next year we'll have some extra funding. After that, it's gone.
Anything else on financial?
We didn't get any more surprises for the $1 million from them. Again, I know that.
Yeah, we did. At the very end of December, we got an extra, I think it was 800,000 from Wimker that we didn't expect. And we got an extra, almost 300,000 for something in Ann's area, I think, economic support area. So it was like over $1 million that we got just at the tail end of December.
You just got, they didn't really say how you got it, why you got it, just got it.
They don't tell us why.
Well, we can't figure out how they figured out how to give us that much money. The thing we can't figure out is, we know you're giving it to us for Wimker. Wimker is to make up for what we didn't get in Medicaid revenue that we should have gotten. So we know why we're getting it, we just don't know why that number. The problem is why that number, like, we were thinking, oh, you're gonna give us maybe 600,000, and it comes in at over $1 million, 1.2 million or whatever the number was, or we thought we were gonna get 4, it was $1 million. So it's like,
But you can't base a budget line on that, because you
no.
really never know.
Well, so talking, you know, preliminarily, you know, the budget's coming, we have to start working on it like right now. We have to have it done, you know, by May, because you guys see it in June. And what are we gonna do? And basically, we know 2 things. One, we think our expenses are gonna go up, more so than they have in the past. So we're gonna need to do something different to budget for some more expenses. We are going to probably, and I talked with Janet about this, and I think she'll verify this next month if you ask her, is that we're going to guesstimate high on some of these revenue streams. And even though the auditors do not want us to do that, we are gonna start estimating high on what we think is gonna come in these pots, because we can't have that number stay there, because in reality, we're gonna have to trim our budget by close to $2 million for 2020, just to pay for salary, fringe, provider costs, because there's gonna be a significant amount of money going to the new pay and benefit structure. Our vendors are not making it work with their staff. They can't hire people. So we're gonna have to pay them a lot more money. So we're looking at probably 2 million more in how much we're gonna have to come up with. And that means we're gonna have to either cut more or we're gonna have to estimate more revenue. So I think what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna estimate a heck of a lot more revenue. And maybe we're gonna guess right, maybe we're gonna guess wrong, but I can't keep not guessing this thing for revenue and having this extra revenue come in. And it looks like we have all this surplus, I think we're just gonna have to like estimate high on our revenues.
Revenues or expenses?
Well, we have to estimate higher on our revenues. We're gonna have to, and we're gonna have to, because we're gonna have to also increase some of our expenses. And our salary and fringes, that's gonna go up pretty substantially. Because I'm just guesstimating that you guys are gonna do something about pay and benefits at county board level. So if that happens, that's gonna factor into what I need to come up with. And then also, providers. Providers can't hire people, where they are right now. We are very dependent on our providers. We have over 100 contracts. I think over 20 million, 25 million is contractor. So we're gonna have to crank it up. And when we do all that, I'm gonna need probably 2 million overall. And so we're gonna have to estimate more on our revenue side and hopefully see where else we can trim. But we did trim in a couple of categories that are now ending up looking like we're gonna be too low on those. So it's where I was many years ago. We're trying to get it down to 0. We'll see if we can hit it in 24.
You mentioned that you'll probably be needing a budget transfer of some kind for the residential care center costs for this year.
Yep.
Will you
And
also,
possibly RCCs. Too. The
Yeah.
residential care.
yes, will you also be looking for an adjustment for the juvenile correction situation too? Because I think we only budgeted for 6 months.
Yeah,
I think it is one.
yeah, yeah, we probably will.
She found something last time, I think you said.
I thought you just giving time out about the time that's. What
And probably inpatient for adults too. So, so what Jen and I are gonna do is, we talked about probably in June, we'll have a pretty good idea of like what we can estimate for the rest of the year. When we find out where our accounts are too low, some of our accounts that are probably gonna be too high, we'll just do some internal transfers, but we need your permission to make those transfers. So we're gonna bring it back to the county board for the transfers. We're not gonna be looking for more money, I don't think, from the general fund. We're just gonna transfer some things around.
There's one more question. I'll get off, but I know when they had this study, they just did for all of them, heard it in the county. And it was really critical because it was way off, should have been a long time ago. And I know they had that money they put away, it was like $2 million to kind of offset something. And it was the end of the year, so they must have had, always had their reviews, right?
Mhm.
And they got whatever they got coming of that, if they got a 4 or 2 or 1, whatever they were talking.
Yep.
And they're probably gonna be short, because they're gonna do some more advice because they're way off on the pay structure. What I heard was not close to what it should be, so it's gonna be quite a bit.
So for instance, a 1% increase in 1% increase to salaries
Okay.
represents probably about $500,000 for us. So every 1% more that you increase things, I have to find another $500,000. That's how it works.
But we have to get back a little more,
Right.
because some of that stuff.
No, I'm not saying that.
You know,
I'm just trying to tell you
No.
It is.
what it
I
represents.
understand.
I'm please, I'm not telling you not to do what you think is right. Because I certainly will support, I mean, I support the fact that our staff, right now, and that was just telling me, we're a couple bucks an hour behind on mental health therapists without a gig. So we definitely need to increase. I'm just telling you, my job as the administrator is basically like, we gotta find the money to make that happen.
1% in this department is $500,000.
Right, 1% in this department alone. We represent about 25% of the workforce and not quite 25% of the overall county budget. But we're pretty close to that. 25% of the county budget is us.
It's gotta be a good thought of this, because what it said is the last time in 2016, they did a study, they recommended quite a bit of stuff. But she said right out when I asked her that it really didn't do a lot with that. So now you come up with another study and it says that you're way off. And I said this every time I went to a meeting, because everyone is waiting, all employees, everyone's waiting. Because we're waiting to hear study. don't do something and try to figure out what we're doing, we'll lose more employees, things will be worse than this. I think very important, this has to be one of our top things, to keep the people we got, because you're doing such a great job, you don't wanna mess that, in my opinion.
And that's why I'm saying, I am not discouraging you at all from doing what you feel is the right thing to do. I am just letting you know that as I'm working toward figuring out this budget for next year, I have some challenges, and yes, we do have 4 million ahead for last year. Every year, I think that shouldn't be the number because we're cutting about $1.5 million every year. I'm perplexed by that, but I think it's probably mostly due to the fact that ARPA's putting a ton of money our way. And I just fear for like what's gonna happen in 25, but we gotta do what we gotta do right now. And we'll make it work. And you guys, I think my message to you, all of you who are on the county board, is you hear what the consultant has to say, and you make your decisions about what you want to do with the workforce, and we'll figure it out.
I think back to Harold's question though, can you come up with a figure of what I would call unanticipated income that you received this year? And if you put that against the $4 million, what you'd really have left over if you hadn't gotten those dollars?
I try to figure that out by, if you look at,
You know what I mean?
well, we got travel, we got capital, and we got operating. Don't look at it.
I'm looking at revenue bill.
Doesn't Janet usually do that when she finalizes?
And she's got a pie chart that she's been talking about on anticipated revenue, it's not here.
But if you pulled out what that total ARPA dollar and took it off of the,
Well, what I'm trying to say by looking at everything but labor, up above and expenses, is that you see how we came out on travel, capital, and operating expenses. So we were under, by about $1.2 million on expenses, okay? So this has nothing to do with the extra stuff that comes in. We budgeted certain expenses for last year.
Yeah.
And we came in 5.8% better, which equals 1.2 million. So if I would tell you, if we took out all the equations of all this extra money that comes in, we would have been ahead by 1.2, and we add for travel, we add 96. So let's say 1.3. So I will tell you short math, and just like this is very ballpark, we would have had a $1.3 million surplus.
yeah, that's.
Okay, so the rest of whatever's in there
Yeah.
is really coming through those other channels that is making up that difference. So that's the short math. Now, is it totally 100%? Is that the way it works? No, there's some things that mitigated the operating expenses, yes. Not so much the travel and not so much the capital. And the labor also gets adjusted because when we can put ARPA monies toward labor, then we can adjust that too. So, but I think it's more realistic. What is our operating expense? What is our travel? What is our capital? What is our labor? And even our labor came in at less too. So, but I guess what I'm not explaining to them. You probably should talk to Janet. Now that I think about that, because if I had it all out. So, but I will tell you, but we have expense, so my point is, we have expenses. And if we do well on those expenses, then we have a surplus. That's what I would normally expect to have, is when we pay all of our bills, what do we have left over? And the extra revenue is not revenue that we counted on to pay those bills. So I guess it is what I'm saying. I would expect that our surplus should be somewhere around $1 million. If we do everything well in a year, it really should be around $1 million. It was averaging that for a lot of years at the beginning. $1 million plus or minus 500,000 of 1.5.
Not to whip a dead horse, and if I'm getting too far ahead, just say that we're gonna talk about this later. By increasing salaries 1%, you're gonna increase $500,000. That seems crazy high to me. So 1% of my $13 salary is a few cents, if I figured it out right. Yeah, it's like a dollar, no, 13 cents.
For an hour, but then multiply it times 52 weeks.
Well, this is, okay, so labor is 23 million. 1% of 23 million is
But how many employees do you have?
2.3 million?
How many employees do you have?
The
230,000.
200 grand, so a little bit off, but still.
Well, there's some other things that go into
Into it, yeah.
labor, the fringes. I mean, there's a little
Right.
bit more involved.
So if we're thinking about giving them $2 an hour, that's a whole lot more than a 1% increase. That's gonna be more on the order of. Yeah, so then that would increase that by factor of 10, so that's.
But overall, whatever the overall increase
I
is,
just kind of get.
it translates to about 500,000, maybe, 400 or 500,000.
So it's.
I mean, I kind of round things when I'm talking to Janet because otherwise she gets too much into
Yeah, I
the,
can understand
to
that.
the details for me. And mind you, I did drop out of accounting 101. So you have to take what I'm telling you with a little bit of, I think I know what I'm talking about, but I don't deal with this every day. Janet's better to tell you how much it represents. But to me, it seems like for every 1%, we're dealing with another $500,000.
At least 250, which is significant.
So 250, 300. I mean,
Yeah,
it's-
right.
But it's still,
So if we increase their salaries by 10 times more, then we're looking at 10 times more of that increase in the budget. Just
well,
for
I'm
this
hearing,
department.
I mean, what little bit I'm hearing is, let's say it was 5% increase overall. Then that's a challenge, because even at 300,000, that's 1.5 million
Right,
for me.
right.
So, I mean, let's just go with, we'll be conservative and say that's 1.5 million if we're gonna raise it 5%, which we could.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
significant
And,
numbers.
but my point is, this is what I told John, is that I'd rather do it all at once. And then figure out how to pay for it and then go from there than to try to figure out, like, how do we get there over 3 years, because that doesn't work at all.
I'll agree with that.
Do it all at once.
But we're just for some fun, then, I excuse me.
But it is, it's a challenge. My point is, it's a challenge because I have a large budget. That when it gets multiplied, it becomes a lot on top of all the other stuff we got in the budget.
And your 25% is that right?
Okay,
Thanks.
sorry about my numbers. If I'm wrong next
That's
month
okay.
and Janet tells you he doesn't know what he's talking about.
We'll listen to her. We'll listen to her.
Yeah.
And just speaks it never again.
And next time I will not venture a guess when you ask me math questions, because clearly my accounting is totally off.
All right, moving on.
Okay.
All right,
Deputy Director report, we got one of
okay,
those?
she doesn't have one.
All right.
She was not there.
All right, Director report, Bill.
Okay, so just a couple of things. One, I wanted to report, again, officially, my apologies to Karen, who waited patiently for me to pick her up to go to Cap Day. And I ended up changing the plan, going with John and Ethan and Ralph. And we were actually in, what's that town that we're in? Rosendale.
Rosendale.
We're in Rosendale and Karen called up and said, I'm waiting in the parking lot. I'm like, "Oh." So, many apologies to Karen.
It's all we're done with, we're fine, we're fine.
Karen and I are fine. Karen is first,
On the other hand,
Here's
Friday.
Friday's terrible.
Karen is first on the list to go to, April 12th, Human Services Day at the Capitol. We will have a van. I will be driving. We will be leaving from 7 o'clock.
that was involved.
Here, we're leaving for 7 o'clock from the parking lot at Human Services. If you want to go, there will be a seat on the van. If enough people want to go, we'll have 2 vans.
Yep.
We go down to Madison. This is what happened this past, week ago Wednesday. You go down to Madison, you get there about 9 o'clock. You have a briefing with WCA, the Wisconsin County Association. They do a briefing on the top issues of the day, and then you spend the rest of the day going over to the Capitol, meeting legislators and talking about your agenda. So how it happened this time was, we had 6 different scheduled meetings with 6 different legislators. And, we went from one part of the Capitol to the other, bounced around, got a tour in the middle of it. And we had 30 minutes apiece. And John and Ethan had 25 minutes of that 30. And so they talked about whatever John and Ethan wanted to talk about, which wasn't even on the agenda for the day. But then we had 5 minutes at the end where I could get my 5 minutes crammed in there, and then poor Ralph didn't even have an opportunity to speak, at all. So it was very rushed. But I will say this, I think it was good. There were 3 legislators that I had never met before, but at least I got introduced to. So at least now they know who I am, and we talked a little bit about, the part that we were there to talk about was 2 things that, WCA is promoting for counties, human services, is one, 100% funding, Medicaid funding for, a mental health program called Community Services Program. That's for severely mentally ill folks. And, right now, the counties pays the non-federal share, which is about 40% of every dollar we pay, and then the feds kick in 60 cents. The state doesn't really kick in anything. So we would like them to kick in the 40%. They have done that in some other programs. We're just kind of pushing that. It's in the governor's budget. At least he kind of teased that in his state of the state address. So that one looks like it's probably going to end up in the governor's budget. Of course, we know that the other side is saying we're not going to deal with the governor's budget. We're just going to throw it away and we're going to start over. So we don't know if it's going to end up there or not there. But we talked about that. We talked about 100% funding of mental health crisis services. Same deal there. We pay the 40%, the feds pay the 60. We want the state to pay the 40%. Maybe it'll end up in the governor's budget. We don't know. We still think it might. And then the other one is an extra, I think it was 10 million for adult protective services funding for Best Crew, so that they can get out and do more adult protective services investigations at nursing homes and other places where we think somebody might be taking advantage of an older adult. And so those were the things on the agenda. We got through those real quick. I think it was at least a good meeting to kind of warm us up to what's going to happen in April. So it was good for me because I hadn't done that like in 3 years. So I was like, oh yeah, now I remember we got to do this, then we got to do this. The concourse is like a block away from the Capitol, and there's nothing but steps and inclines all the way up. So if you're coming in April, just be prepared. We're going to be doing some walking. It's going to be steps and incline. And I just want to like prepare people. There aren't any, unfortunately, there isn't any way to get some help getting up to the Capitol. So just be prepared to walk. And if that's something that you're going to struggle with, just, I guess, let me know. We'll see if we can do anything else about it.
So it's April 12th. I have that in my calendar. Meeting at the
7 o'clock, we leave.
7 a.m. at the parking lot of Human Services in Oshkosh.
Oshkosh.
And we will wait probably until 10 after 7. And then I have to take off because otherwise we won't get there in time. So that day, we go to the concourse, we organize there, we go up to the Capitol. I'm going to try to organize all of our legislators to meet in one room for an hour. And then that way we don't have to trot around to all different parts of the Capitol. Because doesn't it get confusing, Ralph, where all these little cubbies around the Capitol, where all these different representatives are, and you don't know which direction you're in.
You gotta get there right on time, because the door's not open if you're, you gotta use your slot.
Yeah, you got your slot. So I'll try to do 1 hour with everybody in one conference room, and then we'll be done. So there is a lunch. I'm thinking we're probably gonna do the briefing in the morning, then we'll probably stay for lunch, and I'll try to get an early afternoon group meeting with the legislators, and then we'll just do that for an hour, and then we'll all have that. So we'll make it real efficient and easy going on our bodies.
It's well worth it. I mean, I learned so much, and we get to meet the aides, and meet the people that are working there, and they told us about other things. We learned a lot of stuff. I think it's talking, it's listening to those.
And they all have very different ideas about what should or shouldn't be in the budget, and they'll all tell us what they think.
But they
Typically in April, what's going to be different about April is that the governor's budget will be out on the 15th of February, thereabouts, I think. Then we'll know what's in his budget. Then the other side will comment about what they like or don't like in the budget. By April, they're going to be starting to deliberate on the budget. They're going to have those public hearings around the state, which they typically do. And then when we go there that day, chances are we're probably not going to meet with too many legislators because they're going to be on the floor. They're going to be doing whatever they're doing. But we do meet with their assistants. And I will tell you, their assistants are as knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than what they know. So I think it won't be a wasted day. If you want to go, You get a lunch and you get a drive and you get to meet some legislators or citizens, and we get to talk about human services stuff.
And what time do you think we'd be back to Oshkosh?
If I can get us scheduled for 1 to 2, we could be back by 4:30.
Yeah.
I mean, typically you get back by 5. It just depends on if we hit rush hour there, we don't. I mean, things start getting busier around 3 o'clock and Madison. So I'm thinking I'm gonna try to go for 1 and see if we can get 1 or 1:30 in a conference room. We'll just stay for an hour and then we'll all walk back and get in the van and get out of Dodge and get back here. So that was the big report that I had. There is going to be a May conference at the Osthoff in Elkhart Lake. I believe it's the first couple of days of May, like the 3rd, 4th. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think it's early. I'll double check on that. But anyway, so you're all invited to the May conference. You guys typically drive there if you want to go, and then we book the motels or we book the Osthoff.
Yeah, I don't have it on my calendar.
And then most of the meals for those 3 days are in the registration.
Yeah.
You get to meet with other county folks, other county board members for that conference in May. That's a WICSA conference. It's Elkhart Lake. So it's really nice. If you haven't been to the Osthoff, it's a very nice kind of resort kind of place in Elkhart Lake, and nice setting for conference. And, you know, Karen's been there multiple times. Larry, you've been there lots and lots. That's where we're gonna be in May.
Old resort, you get all remodeled, not modeled.
I don't know if they're remodeled.
All remodeled, not too long.
I don't know if they're remodeled or whatever. It's kind of an older resort. It's kind of nice.
Okay, so that's it for my report. Unless anybody's got any questions.
Becky,
Nothing for me.
Harold,
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Rachel,
Holy crap.
Karen?
Have a question, one sort of feel-good story, I think. Is there gonna be a wheelchair wash this spring?
We haven't had a meeting yet, but I'm kind of targeting July 15th in the morning.
Okay. And then, only tangentially maybe connected to human services, but, over the weekend, I heard that Trinity Episcopal Church is buying up like over $12 million of medical debt from people in Wisconsin. And they only have to raise like 12,000. It's like pennies on the dollar. And, they'll be able to buy up debt, whereas they usually sell them to debt collectors who hassle the debt. We buy the debt, pay off people's debt and get people out of debt for their medical bills. For Wisconsin residents, they're not signaling it just for Winnebago County, it will be statewide. And I had heard about this about 4 or 5 years ago in Chicago, they were doing this. I don't know why this isn't being done all over the place, but anyway, I thought it was a good story, but I have better numbers for sure. I can let you know.
Do you know how to access that? Like
Um,
if I was behind in medical debt or anything, how would I access?
I don't know. The church is buying it from healthcare people. I mean, I don't know how you do that. How do they deal with the church is becoming a debt collector, but instead of collecting it, we're paying it off. Okay.
It's an interesting idea.
I read something about the Fox Valley Fellowship Unitarian Church.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, they're doing something like that too, so. I can't remember all the details, but I did read an article in.
So they're doing it too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, nothing.
Ralph?
Well, he said, well, it was a good time, it's worth going, so. So appreciate it.
The only thing I got is, Ralph and I, later on this week, we're going to Washington DC for, 5 days. And, the National County. To the NACO, National, County Association, I'll drag, Ralph around to a couple of nights. I serve on the 2 steering committees, the Human Services and Education Steering Committee and the Health and Counties Steering Committee, so we'll be busy for good these steering committees are all day long. I mean, it starts like at 8 o'clock in the morning. They break for lunch, then go back in the afternoon, like 1 o'clock until like 4:30 in the afternoon. So they're long, meetings, but very educational. You get to see what's going on in the other counties, across the country, you know, in other states. So that should be interesting. So we'll give you a little report when we get back from that next month. Other than that, I don't have anything. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
We're good, Jern.
There's a second?
Second.
Debatable, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, thank you, we're adjourned.
Oh, I didn't know if you said that to me, and I know.
So childcare is not something
Yes.
that
Yes. Not like they could show who they want to buy.
we,
The
the
hospital.
only thing that's.
They-